What if I told you there's a PulseChain token that has already seen over $5.9 million in buybacks, while still sitting at a single-digit million-dollar valuation? Sounds impossible, but that's exactly why I started digging deeper. Because what I found wasn't just a meme coin, it was an entire ecosystem generating revenue from multiple different sources. And the deeper I dug, the more I understood why some people are talking about a potential 100x. The token is called PCOCK, and today we're going to see whether the 100x thesis is complete nonsense, or whether there might actually be something here. The first thing that caught my attention at the time of recording: PCOCK's valuation is still tiny compared to what many successful crypto projects have reached in previous bull markets. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is where the demand could potentially come from. Because according to LibertySwap's public statements, PCOCK isn't dependent on a single source of buying pressure. It's connected to an entire ecosystem. And that's where things start getting interesting. The buyback machine. Before we talk about revenue, you need to understand something. The LibertySwap dashboard publicly tracks buybacks and burns. And when I first saw the numbers, I honestly had to double-check them. Over $5.9 million worth of buybacks. More than 15% of the total supply already burned. And this is where the story begins. Because the obvious question is, where is all that buying pressure coming from? The answer surprised me. One important thing to understand now before we continue. There's something important that often gets overlooked. The buybacks are not some future promise. They're already happening today. You can verify them yourself on the LibertySwap dashboard. But here's where things get interesting. Just because buybacks are happening doesn't automatically mean the dollar price explodes overnight. Why? Because PCOCK still exists within the broader PulseChain ecosystem, and over the last months, many PulseChain assets have suffered from the overall market conditions, PCOCK included. However, when you compare PCOCK against PulseChain itself, the picture becomes much more interesting. Because despite the difficult market conditions, PCOCK has actually shown relative strength versus PulseChain, which raises an interesting question. What happens if these buybacks continue, while the overall PulseChain ecosystem eventually enters a strong bull market? Because at that point, you could potentially have two powerful forces working together: a rising ecosystem and a shrinking supply. That's the scenario many bulls are paying attention to. The chart tells an interesting story. Now, some people might look at the chart and say, if millions of dollars have already been used for buybacks, why hasn't the price exploded? And honestly, that's a fair question. Because when you look at the dollar chart, PCOCK has still suffered alongside much of the PulseChain ecosystem. But here's where things get interesting. When you compare PCOCK directly against PulseChain itself, the picture changes. Despite difficult market conditions, PCOCK has actually shown relative strength versus PulseChain. In other words, the buybacks may not be fully visible in dollar terms yet, but they may already be visible in the ratio. And that raises another question. What happens if the buybacks continue, while PulseChain itself eventually enters a strong bull market? Revenue stream number 1, ZKX Wallet. The first source is the ZKX Wallet, and this is where things start getting really interesting. According to LibertySwap's own announcements, in-wallet swaps and bridges across supported chains will generate front-end fees. And those fees are intended to be used for PCOCK buybacks. Think about what that means. Every swap, every bridge, every user, potentially contributing to buy pressure. And this is only the first revenue stream, because the next one might be even bigger. Revenue stream number 2, Liberty We3. The second piece of the puzzle is Liberty We3. This is where traders generate fees through activity on the platform. And according to the team, those fees can be directed toward buying back and burning PCOCK. In fact, they announced periods where 100% of collected fees would go toward buybacks and burns. Now stop for a second and think about this. If trading volume grows, fees grow. If fees grow, buybacks grow. And if buybacks grow, the burn rate grows too. Which leads to the next question. What happens if the ecosystem becomes significantly larger during a bull market? We'll come back to that in a moment. Revenue stream number 3, bridges. Another major component is bridging. And this might be one of the most important long-term pieces, because every new user entering PulseChain needs a way to get there. LibertySwap has been heavily focused on onboarding and cross-chain infrastructure. And according to the team's statements, bridge-related revenue also contributes to the broader buyback system. Again, more usage, more fees, more buybacks, more burns. You're probably starting to notice a pattern. The fourth revenue stream I found that most people aren't talking about is Liberty HyperMarket. And unlike some future products, this one is already live. Liberty HyperMarket is a decentralized prediction market built on LibertySwap. Users can speculate on sports, politics, crypto events, and much more, including World Cup markets. Now here's where things get really interesting. According to LibertySwap, 100% of all fees generated on Liberty HyperMarket are used to buy and burn PCOCK. Think about that for a second. Every market, every prediction, every user, potentially contributing to buy pressure. And unlike some future revenue streams, this one is already generating activity today. Another product, another revenue stream, another source of buy pressure, and we're still not done yet. The part most people are missing. Most people look at PCOCK and think, oh, it's just another meme coin. But the actual bull case isn't the meme. The bull case is the ecosystem. Every swap, every bridge, every trade, every new user potentially contributes to buy pressure. And that's what makes this project different from most meme coins. Because the team has discussed additional products including Liberty Lend, HyperMarket, perpetual trading, yield products, auto compounding, on-ramp services, off-ramp services, and more. Now imagine for a second that multiple products are generating revenue simultaneously. What happens to buy pressure then? That's the question that got my attention. Imagine you're wrong about PCOCK. Imagine it's not just a meme. Imagine LibertySwap becomes one of the primary onboarding platforms for PulseChain. Imagine thousands of users swapping, bridging, trading, using the wallet, using HyperMarket every single day. What happens to buybacks then? What happens to burns then? What happens to supply then? That's the scenario bulls are betting on. So why are people talking about 100x? Now let's be clear, a 100x is never guaranteed. Most projects never get anywhere close. But here's why people are even discussing it. PCOCK is starting from a relatively small valuation. At the same time, it potentially benefits from wallet fees, bridge fees, swap fees, trading fees, hypermarket fees, and future ecosystem products. And if all of those revenue streams continue growing, the economics become very different from a typical meme coin. Let's do some quick math. If a project sitting around an $8 million valuation reaches $800 million, that's a 100 times. Sounds crazy, but crypto has seen much larger moves before, especially when strong narratives meet strong tokenomics. The difference is that Peacock isn't relying entirely on hype. It has a mechanism designed to generate buy pressure, and that's where the speculation begins. I believe in a 100x for Peacock from here. A small community observation. One funny thing the community noticed recently, Richard Heart posted a picture, and in the background, people spotted a peacock. Does that prove anything? No, absolutely not. But it's interesting how quickly the community picked up on it. Because whether you like it or not, Peacock is becoming part of the broader PulseChain culture. Final thoughts. Maybe Peacock never does a 100x. Maybe it never reaches those valuations. Maybe none of this matters. But after looking at the buybacks, the burns, the revenue streams, and the ecosystem being built around it, I can finally understand why some people believe it could. That's why I'll be watching this project very closely. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, and give it a thumbs up for the algorithm. I'll see you in the next one.